Where I Come From by the Canadian poet Elizabeth Brewster appeared in her 1977 collection Sometimes I Think of Moving, although it was probably written some years earlier. Brewster was from an impoverished background, born and raised in the small logging community of Chipman in the Canadian province of New Brunswick. She is known for her exploration of themes of place, memory and emotion, and for her preoccupation with self-identity. In the poem, she asserts her belief that the places in which people grow up have an indelible effect on the psyche and become an integral part of their identity. She begins by describing how people who come from the city seem to exude the smells of urbanization, i.e. that of the pollution created by factories, of nature and art artificially curated and constrained in tidily plotted little squares and museums, and of humanity forced to live together in close proximity. In contrast, her identity is made up of nature, which is wild and unconstrained and deeply ingrained in memory. Acres of pine woods, blueberry patches and battered schoolhouses. These images evoke a sense of authenticity and simplicity, suggesting a life connected to the natural world and free from the artificiality of urban living. This contrast between the oppressive and constrained city and the expansive, untamed countryside underscores her belief in the profound impact of place on shaping who we are. For Brewster, the rural environment is not only a backdrop, but a vital, enduring part of her identity. The poem comprises 3 stanzas of 11, 8, and 2 lines respectively. It is written in free verse, which means that it has neither a fixed metrical or rhythmic structure nor a fixed rhyme scheme. Brewster modulates the rhythm through extensive use of enjambment and caesura to create a rhythm that mirrors the natural ebb and flow of thought. Combined with the fact that much of the poem comprises lists of images demarcated by semicolons, this gives the poem a layered, cumulative quality, as though Brewster is piecing together impressions to explore the relationship between people and the places they inhabit. These structural choices enhance the poem's reflective and conversational tone, drawing readers into the way Brewster's ideas about place and identity seem to unfold organically. This natural rhythm seems to reinforce the poem's central ideas, that identity is shaped by a blend of sensory impressions, memories, and connections to place. The 2 lists serve different purposes in the 2 halves of the poem and contribute significantly to its meaning and tone. The first list catalogues the smells and sensations associated with cities: the smell of smog, the almost not smell of tulips, museum smell, the smell of work, chromium-plated offices and smell of subways crowded at rush hours. These items are presented in rapid succession, creating a sense of busyness, monotony, and superficiality. The structure mirrors the overwhelming, chaotic, and fragmented nature of urban life. The repetition of smell emphasizes how sensory experiences in the city are often unappealing, artificial, or faint. Even something beautiful, like tulips in spring, is diminished to an almost not smell, reinforcing the idea that city life lacks vibrancy and authenticity. The second half shifts to a more descriptive and nostalgic list of rural images: woods, acres of pine woods, blueberry patches, wooden farmhouses, yards where hens and chickens circle, battered schoolhouses, and violets. The items in the rural list evoke a sense of permanence and deep connection, as though these memories are etched into the speaker's identity. The rhythm here feels slower and more meditative, reflecting the peace and timelessness of rural life. Each image feels carefully selected, almost sacred, contrasting with the rushed, impersonal tone of the urban section. The juxtaposition of these lists underscores the central theme of the poem, which is that there are fundamental differences between city and rural life. Urban life is fleeting, artificial and disconnected, while rural life is enduring, organic and deeply personal. Brewster's diction is straightforward. She has been described as a plain poet, which is meant as a compliment, and she herself once said that she generally uses a language which is clear, straightforward, and with little adornment, elaborating that I do not normally allow myself a word which I should not use in plain prose, and I normally also use the sentence construction of plain prose. While we do find examples of metaphor, e.g. people are made of places and a door in the mind blows open, and simile, e.g. like the smell of smog, her use of figurative language and sound patterning techniques, e.g. the alliteration of different drops and smell of smog, is restrained and understated. The title, Where I Come From, is taken from the first line of the second stanza. When we read it, it's natural to put the stress on where I come from, and to expect the poem to focus on the geographical aspect of her origins. It feels like the poem will primarily describe a place, its physical characteristics, landscapes, and details about its location. When, however, this line appears at the beginning of the second stanza, the stress subtly shifts to where I come from, as opposed to where those other people come from. The line becomes more about her sense of self and less about the external location, and draws attention to how her rural upbringing has shaped her personality and worldview. The poem begins as Brewster sets out her stall that people are made of places. This metaphor suggests that our identities are fashioned by the locations in which we have grown up. The plosive alliteration of the p sound here subtly suggests the way the two are inextricably linked. The shortness of the sentence enhances the force of this assertion and gives the reader the sense that she will brook no opposition to her claim. A suggestion that they carry with them hints of jungles or mountains, a tropic grace or the cool eyes of sea gazers, conveys her belief that this connection to place is so deeply ingrained that it physically manifests in people's demeanour, behaviour, and even their mannerisms. The phrase carry with them implies that these impressions are not just memories, but are an integral, ever-present part of their being, shaping how they move and interact with the world. The use of specific imagery such as a tropic grace or the cool eyes of sea gazers reinforces the idea that these geographical influences are visible in a person's very essence, making place an inseparable component of identity. Note the very positive imagery that Brewster uses here. Those who come from the tropics are graceful or elegant. The term sea gazer functions as a metaphor, capturing not only a person's connection to the sea, but also the reflective, calm and expansive qualities that such an environment might instill in them. Brewster now turns her attention onto those who come from the city. Atmosphere of cities, how different drops from them, like the smell of smog. Note how her tone subtly shifts here. The identity of city dwellers is also shaped by their environment, but it is implied that this is not in a good way. The exclamatory interpolation, how different, signals the contrast that she finds. Not only does the plosive alliteration of the d sound in different drops hint at Brewster's disdain for city life, but even the punctuation in this line seems to reflect her dismissive attitude. The lack of commas to separate the parenthetical remark "how different," in combination with the enjambment, creates a sense of carelessness, mirroring the way the atmosphere of cities drops from them without intentional delicacy, almost as if they are contaminated and it is being excreted from their pores. This structural looseness contrasts sharply with the elegance implied in the earlier tropic grace, which is instead carried by its people, reinforcing the idea that urban life lacks the refinement, purity, and authenticity Brewster associates with more natural environments. Note the hissing, sibilant alliteration in the simile "like the smell of smog," which is also a subtle clue as to Brewster's disdainful attitude. The city dwellers also exude the almost not smell of tulips in the spring. The compound adjective almost not smell evokes the bland artificiality of the municipal planting. The fragrance from the tulips is so faint that it might just as well not be there. Everything in the city has its place. Plants only grow where they have been planned, and water is artificially pumped. Nature is tidily plotted in little squares with a fountain in the centre. Everything reeks of uniformity and a rigid geometry. Art and creativity are also curated and constrained. Museum smell, art also tidily plotted with a guidebook. The phrase museum smell evokes the sense of things being shut away, of mustiness, sterility, and the odour of polished floors. The concept of tidiness usually has positive associations, but here it seems to communicate a stifling impersonality and lack of individuality. The repetition of tidily plotted is another indication of Brewster's contempt. Not only is the smell of leisure in the cities tainted, but also that of work. Glue factories, maybe, chromium-plated offices. Brewster's reference to glue factories here is meant to be unpleasant. They were historically associated with an offensive stench because traditional methods of making glue involved boiling animal parts, including bones and skins. The strong, acrid smell would have been pervasive and obnoxious, symbolising the harsh and industrial aspects of city life. The image of chromium-plated offices is also meant negatively. While they may seem ultra-modern, their gleam is nevertheless superficial, as they are merely plated with the metal. The smell of subways, crowded at rush hours, evokes the seething and sweating mass of humanity that is forced into close proximity at the beginning and end of the work day. She continues, "Where I come from, people carry woods in their minds, acres of pine woods." Now we can hear that it is natural to shift the emphasis away from the where and onto the I here, as she draws the distinction between the two types of people. Where I come from. The image of acres of pine woods seems to allude to the area of Chipman in New Brunswick, where Brewster was born and raised, which was a logging community, and so would have been surrounded by forests. The word acres evokes vast expanses and implies freedom, while pine woods have associations of sweet-smelling freshness. Note how Brewster reverts to the verb carry as opposed to drops, which has connotations of a pride and dignity which are conscious. The way she focuses on the minds of these people, rather than their bodies, suggests a sense of intellectual and spiritual superiority. Note how the first line of the second stanza is significantly indented. This visually emphasises the shift from the urban to the rural, creating a stronger separation between the two worlds. The visual gap mirrors the conceptual divide Brewster establishes in the poem. The contrast between the artificial, polluted and almost animalistic city dwellers and the purity, spirituality and authenticity of the rural people where she comes from. Blueberry patches have sprung up in the burned-out bush, an indication of resilience and resourcefulness, the harshness of the conditions subtly hinted at by the plosive alliteration of the b sounds in burned-out bush. Rather than gleaming chromium-plated buildings, there are wooden farmhouses, old, in need of paint. While the area seems to be run down and impoverished, there is a sense of authenticity, timelessness and simplicity about this way of life. Everyone in the city is always in a rush as they go to and from work on crowded subways, while where Brewster comes from, the hens and chickens circle about, clucking aimlessly. There is no rush to be anywhere as life just goes on. Rather than museums with a square out front containing a fountain and decorative but regimented rows of tulips, there are battered schoolhouses behind which violets grow. The conditions are harsh here, and the buildings are weathered by wind and snow, with the verb battered suggesting a degree of ferocity. The delicate violets, however, and it is implied the schoolchildren, take shelter against the elements and thrive despite the bleak environment. The psyche of these people is governed by the climate. Spring and winter are the mind's chief seasons, ice and the breaking of ice. These lines suggest that the natural environment, specifically the seasons, profoundly shapes their mental and emotional states. The absence of summer and autumn in these lines is particularly striking and seems deliberate. By focusing on winter and spring as the chief seasons of the mind, Brewster underscores the extremes of the natural world. Coldness and harshness in winter versus renewal and growth in spring, while leaving out the more temperate and transitional seasons of summer and autumn. Winter, with its ice and cold, might symbolise hardship, emotional or mental challenges, while spring, with the breaking of ice, suggests resilience, renewal and new beginnings. Summer and autumn, on the other hand, could represent phases that are more predictable or less impactful in shaping their psyche. It's as though the people she describes are shaped by the forces that are both severe and transformative, rather than by the more comfortable seasons. This could further underscore her belief that the harsh, unyielding natural environment of rural life forges a stronger, more authentic character. The poem ends on the striking image. A door in the mind blows open, and there blows a frosty wind from fields of snow. This metaphor reinforces how the rural environment has shaped her identity. The way in which this door in the mind just blows open suggests that this is not something she consciously chooses or controls, as though it bursts open by itself, exposing her to the raw, elemental forces of her past. It's a sudden, involuntary and forceful action, as though the memory or the essence of her upbringing is so deeply ingrained in her psyche that it cannot be suppressed. The frosty wind from fields of snow is not just a memory, but a vivid, sensory experience that Brewster carries within her, shaping how she perceives the world. This wind feels like a permanent and visceral part of the self. It is not gentle or welcoming. It is harsh, but it is also an inseparable part of her mental landscape. In conclusion, Where I Come From, by Elizabeth Brewster, explores the profound influence of place on personal identity. Through vivid imagery and carefully chosen contrasts between urban and rural environments, Brewster suggests that our identities are shaped by the landscapes and experiences that define our upbringing. The poem's structure reinforces the idea that these connections are deeply ingrained and almost uncontrollable, as seen in the powerful image of the door in the mind that blows open. Brewster ultimately portrays the rural environment as an essential, formative force, shaping not only the physical, but also the mental and emotional identity of those who come from it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.